I led them with cords of kindness, with the bands of love. And I became to them as one who eases the yoke on their jaws, and I bent down to them and fed them.
Shalom, shalom, folks. It's Brother Tyndall from Something to Chew On. Coming in, going to do a video. Going to give you the update on the read-alongs. And stick around for the end, because there'll be a message, a word. It's going to be kind of a word study today, word of encouragement, however you want to label it. Just stick around and you'll see. I'm going to talk about being peculiar, or as some people like to say, you're a weirdo. Have you ever been called a weirdo? I know I have. But we're going to talk about that. But first off, let's do the update. Get that out of the way. As of last week, I was working on Jeremiah. I said I would finish it and get them all uploaded, which I did. So there's a playlist for the read-along playlist for Jeremiah is completely finished, and all the videos have been uploaded to the channel. And the link to that will be in the description of this video. If you scroll down and you look at the description, let me say this too while I'm thinking about it. If you scroll down and you look, the first link you'll see, you click on it, it'll take you to the playlist where all the read-along playlists are that I have done thus far. And then you look past that, and you'll see individual links to each of the individual read-alongs. Like, you know, the first, and they're in order. They're in order. So you'll see Bereshit or Genesis, and you click it, it'll take you to the Genesis read-along playlist where all the videos are. Okay, if you scroll on down, you'll see a couple of links at the very, very end. You'll see one. It's where you can download the eSword Bible study program. That's the software. You'll see it in just a second because I'm going to bring it up on the screen. I actually reconfigured a lot of things. That way I can bring this up on the screen and you can see the text as opposed to me simply reading it. And then the one under that, it says at the foot of the Covenant Ministries. That is the web page where I actually got the audio for these read-along playlists. Okay, now this is the part. I don't often mention this, and I don't bring this up. I don't solicit donations. But I will say this. If the very last link in the description is to a GoFundMe page. If you feel so led, please, by all means, use it. And the only reason I bring that up today is because someone pointed out to me about a week and a half ago that they tried to donate and they couldn't. It had, how did they say it? The GoFundMe page said something like donations are paused or donations are suspended or something like that. Well, I spent 3 or 4 days back and forth with these people, and all that should be rectified and straight. So, you know, like I say, if you're so led, there's the link. Take advantage of it by all means. I appreciate it, and may you be blessed. Like I said, I don't bring that up very much. Okay, now that that's said, the vote last time was between 1 Chronicles and Acts. And who won? The book of Acts. Now I'll say this. I started working on them, last night, I believe, and I want to say 8 chapters. Maybe 9 chapters. I don't remember. Either 8 or 9 chapters. Either way, I'll finish them because there's not very many chapters in that book. 28 chapters, I believe is what it is. But it won't take me long once I sit down and do it. I'll probably, in the next 3 or 4 days, I'll get them finished. And then I'll upload them to YouTube. And I'll share the link to all the various places. All those who follow me, if you like, subscribe, click the bell icon, you'll get notified when I upload them. But all the people who follow me, my homepage, personal page on Facebook and things like that, you'll see it. Okay. The vote for this week is going to be, we're going to put First Chronicles back on the table. And since I've already done First Kings, we're going to Second Kings. So that's the vote this week, is between First Chronicles and Second Kings. Vote in the comment below. All right, there we go. There's all that. That's all the quote-unquote housekeeping things. We'll get those out of the way. Now, let me pull this up. It's been a while since I've done this. Like I said, I've had to reconfigure the software. Yeah, there we go. Okay, like I said, being a peculiar people, or as some would say, you're a weirdo, right? Have you ever been called a weirdo? You'll often hear, you'll often hear the term thrown around in quote-unquote Christian lingo, Christianese, these phrases that people throw around, and they often don't really understand what they mean. They have no concrete definition to the term. It's just a word that's thrown around. But a lot of people don't understand what it actually means. We got to define terms. We've got to put, I've said this and I've said this and I've said this before. A lot of times people will use terms, vague and nebulous concepts. They'll say things, but they don't understand what they're saying. Let's put it this way. And I don't mean this to be mean. It's humorous, but just hear it. Parrots. You have so many people out there that are parrots. Now, what we all know, a parrot just says stuff. But what I mean when I say it's a parrot, meaning they repeat what they have heard, but they have no understanding of what they've said because they don't understand the terms. They've heard somebody say it, they've read it in their Bible, but they actually do not define. They have no definition of the term. So it's just like a vague and nebulous concept that lacks any depth or meaning behind it. Peculiar. Let's see if we can't look into this word. Okay? It's used, one time, I think, in the New Testament. Here, let's pull it up and I'll show you. It's used in the book of Titus. Here, let's pull this up. Make sure I'm going to do all this right. Now, I've got this thing set to the King James Version because that's where the word is. And that's where people get it because it comes from that translation. But we're going to look at something. Here, let me just bring this up. And that way you won't have to see my ugly face. You'll be able to see the text. Okay, here we go. Let's see. What we got going on here? Okay, like I said, Titus chapter 2. Can we all see that? Yeah. Right here's the word peculiar. Let me just verify something before I say this. King James Plus. Yeah, you see right there where it says total KJV occurrences 1. It's used one time in the entirety of the King James, as in the New Testament, which was, the Greek manuscripts. And this is where it's used. And you will often hear people, like it says there, peculiar people. Christians will say, we're peculiar people. Well, that's great, fine, and dandy. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? More importantly, what is it that makes us peculiar? That's the real question. People will say peculiar people, and you're like, why? Why are you peculiar? What is it about us, or you, or however you want to say it? What is it about us as followers of Yeshua Messiah that is supposed to make us peculiar? The fact that we follow him? Okay, well, great. What does that actually mean? What does it look like? the boots on the ground, what does it look like? If that makes any sense. Okay, but let's look at this. I'm gonna go to the straight up King James without all the purple numbers. Those purple numbers are Strong's numbers. Most of you will probably know that, but for those who don't, that's what those are. But let's just back up, and I'm going to read this straight out of the text, what it says. We're going to start at verse 11. Titus 2 and verse 11. It says, "For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men, teaching us that, denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, looking for that blessed hope and that glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ." And here's the verse. "Who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity." We're going to take a look at that word. "And purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works." Now let me just go back here for a second so you can see my ugly face again. We read all that. Notice in verse 12, teaching us that, denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. And then in the verse in question, verse 14, it says that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. We see how all these things in verse here, let me go back to it just so you can see it. Okay, verse 12, all these things, denying ungodliness, worldly lust, that we should live soberly, righteously, godly in this present world, that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. You see, all these things are kind of lumped together in the context of this. And all these things, basically, peculiar people. And like I said, you often hear that phrase, we're peculiar people. I'm a peculiar person. We're peculiar. Okay. But what does it mean? What does that look like? Boots on the ground, how do you walk that out? What is that? It's not just some vague, and I'm a peculiar person because I believe Jesus Christ. No, there's something there. That's the whole thing. Let's try to see if we can't put some sustenance to that phrase so we'll have a better and deeper understanding of what it's actually talking about. Okay, now let's see. I'm going to pull this back up in the version where all the Strong's numbers are. Okay, you see that. For those of you who know how to use the Strong's, you know what all this is. For those of you who don't, I'm going to walk you through it and it'll make sense. But you see right there, right above my mouse, see it's popping up on the screen. It says peculiar. It says G4041. That's the Strong's number. You can go look it up in the Strong's. But when I hover my mouse over this, it's going to show us what that word means. But first, let's go over here and look. Right there in the middle of that verse, it says, let's read the verse again. Titus 2:14, "Who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works." All right? Let's just do something, shall we? Let's pull this same verse up in the English Standard Version and see how it phrases that word iniquity. And I'm going to point something out to you. "Who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness, and to purify for himself a people for his own possession, possession. That's the peculiar right there, okay? But you see how it says lawlessness here? To redeem us from all lawlessness. Okay, let's go back to the King James. Might redeem us from all iniquity. I remember, I'll throw this out here. It's a funny story. This was years ago. Before I knew what this word iniquity meant, I knew it meant sin, wickedness, evil. And I asked the pastor, I said, what is iniquity? He said, it's bad, it's sin. You don't want to. I said, well, I understand that, Pastor. I said, but you've got words like transgression. You've got words here. But I said, I understand that, Pastor. I said, but, you've got words in the text. So some places it says iniquity. Some says it says transgression. Some says it says wickedness. I said, all these different words. I said, but what specifically does iniquity mean? I mean, I said, you got 3 or 4 different words used. I said, so they got to mean slightly different things. What does iniquity mean? And he got mad. And I wasn't trying to call him out. I didn't know at the time. But perhaps it was the Ruach in me prompting me to find out. Now I know. And that's what I'm going to point out. A lot of people see how the King James uses that word iniquity. And we're like, iniquity? Well, what does that mean? We know on some level it's bad, it's sinful, it's whatever. But what does it mean? It means lawlessness. Let's look at it. Let's bring it back up. And I'll show you. Like I said, let's go to this King James where all the numbers are. We see iniquity. It says right below the mouse there, it says G458. I'm going to hover over it so you can see it. Anomia. Illegality. That is violation of law. And that's not talking about man's law. That's talking about the law of God. The Torah. The instructions of the Most High. To redeem us from all lawlessness. Sin. 1 John 3:4. He who transgresses the law sins, for sin is transgression of the law. Lawlessness. Okay? But then it goes on. Just pointing that one out. You notice how the King James translates that word as iniquity. You're like, what does that mean? Well, some of these modern translations translate it more correctly. Lawlessness. No confusion as to what that means. Law, meaning the state of being without the law. Iniquity. The state of being without the law. Law's done away with. Yep, you're in a state of being without the law. If you believe the law's done away with. Makes sense? Anyway, that's not the point of today. The point of today is the word peculiar. Let's bring that up. Periousias, I guess is how you pronounce that. But you see it says total King James occurrences, one time. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on it. And then we're going to go up here to the dictionary. Okay? Shows you the word. That's it. Peculiar. That's all. But I'm going to look up here in the Strongs. And it's going to show us the definition. Let it pull up. Come on, here we go. From the present participle feminine of a compound of these two, and it means being beyond usual, that is special, one's own, peculiar. Okay? Now right here, this is where we're going to go. We're going to take this word back to the Hebrew in the Old Testament. Right? Because we understand the people who wrote this, Paul, he was a Hebrew. Didn't he say he was a Hebrew of Hebrews? You realize all the writers of the New Testament, except maybe Luke, were Hebrews. So they thought with a Hebrew mind. So let's take this Greek word back to its Hebrew equivalent and see what it says and see where and how it's used in the Old Testament. Okay? Now here's the thing, right here, you see right here. What this is, LXX, it's the Septuagint. Basically what that is the Hebrew Old Testament about 150 years before Christ walked on the scene. If I'm not mistaken, it was 150 years. They translated the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek. Okay? And that word right there, H meaning Hebrew, H5459, however you say that, segula, is the one Hebrew word from the Old Testament that is translated into this Greek word G4041, per-iousios, peculiar. See what I'm saying? There's only one word. Sometimes this list here will have 4 or 5 different Hebrew words, but in this case, there's only one Hebrew word. Now, with all that said, let's look to this word back in the Hebrew, where and how it's used in the Old Testament. And let's just see if we can't gain a bit of understanding about this word. Okay? Let's make that simply. We're taking the Greek word and finding its Hebrew equivalent in the Old Testament to see how it's used there. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to go over here. See how it says H5459. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to type that in. H5459. Give it a second. It takes this thing a second to pull up. There it is right there. See, here's the word. G4041. That's the one that's used in Titus 2:14. But you see, here's the definition of the Hebrew word, which is the equivalent of that word, peculiar. Feminine passive participle of an unused root, meaning to shut up, wealth, at closest up, jewel, peculiar, or treasure. And that's most often how you see it used in the Old Testament. Peculiar, treasure, special. You see that? Okay, now, we're still on the same word. I'm going to go up here where it says King James Concordance, and it's going to show us all the places that Hebrew word is used. It's used 8 times in the King James Bible. And there's your list of them right there. It's used 5 times as peculiar, and here's your 5 addresses of where it's used. It's used as jewels, Malachi 3:7, proper. You see all that? I knew that was going to happen. I knew it was. But anyway, my dogs are barking. But the first place that word is used is in Exodus 19:5. So let's look at that, shall we? Let's just pull it out. I'm going to click on that, and we're going to pull it up, and we're going to see what it actually says. Let's go back to the regular King James. 19:5. For those who don't know, this is when the children of Israel had come out of Egypt, and they were at the base of Mount Sinai, and they were about to receive the law. And this is the Most High talking to the people. Okay. Let's just back up to verse 3 and read it right there. It says, And Moses went up unto God, and Yod-Heh-Vav called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thou shalt say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. Who? The children of Israel. Notice it doesn't say the Jews. It says the children of Israel. Verse 4. It says, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Verse 5. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. Verse 6. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. Verse 7. And Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh commanded him. And all the people answered and said, all that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh hath spoken, we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Now let's just point out something here. They haven't received any commandments, not the 10 Commandments, not the Torah. They haven't received any of it yet in writing, but they're agreeing to it. And you notice how the Most High said, if you will keep my covenant, you will be a peculiar people. Now, what do they have to do to keep the covenant? Obey the rules of the covenant. That would be the commandments, the laws, the statutes, and the right rulings. That's not just the 10 Commandments. That's everything. Do we see that? In order for them to be a peculiar people, they had to obey what the Most High told them to do. You see how in Titus it says to redeem us from breaking all those laws, right rulings, statutes, commandments, and to make us peculiar. How? By us walking in obedience to commandments, statutes, right rulings, laws, all that. That's what makes us peculiar. That's what sets us apart from the world. And the world looks at you doing these things and going, you're weird. Yeah, the Bible calls me peculiar because I do these things. Right? Does that make sense? See how you get a fuller understanding? Not just peculiar because, no, there's something that is attached to that. Obedience to the covenant. Let's pull that back up again and look at it again. Just so you see this. Verse 5. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice, go do a study on that. And keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure. How would you be peculiar? If, notice the if and the then statement. A lot of people miss all these things. If you will obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure. If you obey, you will be peculiar. But if you walk in lawlessness, in a state of being without the law, you are not a peculiar treasure. Makes sense? Now let's just look at one other place. Just for curiosity. Wait a minute. Dictionary. Okay? See, it says peculiar. And just so you notice, the one I read, that's the first place in the Old Testament that word's used, is in Exodus 19. And you see how it's connected with obedience to the covenant. Think about that. Now let's look at this. Deuteronomy 14:2. Let's read that and just see what it says there. I'm going to read this and I'll be done. Deuteronomy 14. It says, for thou art a holy people unto Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh thy God. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself above all the nations that are upon the earth. Now let's just read on and see what is connected to this being a peculiar people. Verse 3. It says, thou shalt not eat any abominable thing. Verse 4. These are the beasts which you shall eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the hart. Basically, this is a second going over of what's in Leviticus 11. the food laws. And the swine, because it divideth the hoof, yet cheweth not the cud, it is unclean to you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass. You see how all this food stuff, part of the covenant, obey these things, makes you peculiar? See, the point is, there's things that we have to obey in order to actually be peculiar. And I find it interesting that one of the places this word is used in the Old Testament is in direct conjunction with the dietary laws that so many people think don't apply anymore. Well, if they don't apply, then how are you actually going to be a peculiar people? Just something to chew on. I'll leave it at that. And I'll end this video like I end all of them. Don't just read this thing, but chew on it. And remember, the vote for this week, 1 Chronicles and 2 Kings. Shabbat Shalom, folks.